Right, chapter 4 of Oblomov, part 1. What a chapter. We left it with Tarantyev coming in after a description of Tarantyev's background and stuff. I've written quite a lot of pages about this one actually. And a few translation points as well, because as you can see I've got the Magarshack translation and the Stephen Pearl translation, so it was interesting to compare a couple of things. Starting with the very opening line, when Tarantyev comes in and he says, "Hello, old pal." In Magarshack's translation it says, "Morning, old man." And the Russian is "Zdravstvуй, земляк." So straight away we've got an informal greeting. So I think I quite like old pal actually. That's kind of what I would say in Scotland. We use the word pal quite a lot. In fact, I had a friend called Paul. We always used to joke that the bus driver knew his name because the bus driver would say, "All right, pal," which of course sounds a bit like Paul. Good old PFD. So Tarantyev regales the story of having borrowed 50 rubles from Alexeyev's bastard relation. It's really funny. He keeps referring to Alexeyev's bastard relation, and Alexeyev's like, who? He's no relation of mine. And he mentions it again a couple of times. It just makes it amusing, I think. But what a guy this Tarantyev is. First of all, he demands some snuff and then complains that it's not the good kind. Then he takes a cigar from Oblomov and then he's like, "Oh, you didn't get the imported ones, did you? This is unsmokable," and proceeds to smoke the cigar. We learn that he'd borrowed money from Oblomov he'd borrowed money from Alexeyev's bastard relation and calls him a bastard because the relation asks for the money back. And he's like, who is this guy to be asking me to give him the money back? Does he not know who I am? Kind of thing. And then he says, "Did you at least buy some Madeira?" to Oblomov, after finding out that they're having beef and veal for dinner. So he's basically invited himself for dinner at Oblomov's house. Complains about what they're having and says, "Have you got the Madeira?" Oblomov says no. So Tarantyev very kindly offers to take some money from Oblomov so that he can go and buy the Madeira and of course pocket the change. Another wee translation point here is mishok in the Russian, which I like Pearl's translation of here as stick in the mud, you old stick in the mud. And Magarshack has it down as sluggard. So at some point I'm going to do a video about the translator's notes at the end of the Stephen Pearl translation, which I read this morning, because it's absolutely fascinating. So look out for that coming soon. And just as Tarantyev's about to go and buy the Madeira and take care of some business that he has to see to, Oblomov says, wait a minute. A couple of problems I'd like to run by you, just as he did with all the other guests. Tarantyev stays behind and suggests some solutions, but demands in return champagne and beer. So the first solution to the problem of the apartment is that Tarantyev happens to know an old widow on the Vyborg side of the Neva, which in Petersburg is on the other side of the Neva River, so named as it's being 80 kilometres away from the town of Vyborg. Oblomov's not into the idea at all. He says there are wolves on the Vyborg side. Doesn't want to move there. And it sounds very much like Tarantyev has seen a business opportunity, or rather a conning opportunity. But in actual fact it's not a bad idea if it was done magnanimously. So they go on to discuss the bailiff's letter And Tarantyev says, well, here's what you should do. And he suggests writing a letter to the police to ask them to go and check on the bailiff, because the bailiff's quite clearly a con artist. Takes one to know one, right? Then he's to write a letter to the governor asking the governor to check on the police and make sure that they're checking on the bailiff. And he tells him what to write. You know, he says, plead that your 12 children, each younger than the last, are all suffering because of this con artist bailiff who's stealing all your money. And I mean, it's a clever idea, actually. It makes sense that if Oblomov were to write these letters and actually get some comeback from, and it sounds like Tarantyev knows exactly how to word these things to get a response. He also says, write to the governor's secretary, because then she'll be the one to give, or she or he will be the one to give the order to the police to go and check on the bailiff. So yeah, it's a good solution, but I think he's in it for himself. And then we learn that Oblomov hasn't been to his estate for 12 years. What chance has he of keeping his finger on the pulse? I mean, if you were his bailiff and you'd been working out there for 12 years without sight of your landlord, would you not be taking the piss as well? I don't know. Anyway, that's certainly what's happening. So the solution is for Oblomov to move to his estate for the summer, take control of things, and then move to this apartment on the Viborg side, which will cost him 1,000 rubles a month rather than 1,500, which is what he's currently paying. So it sounds like a good solution, actually, but asking Oblomov to get things done, yeah, it's not a great idea. He says, write your letters now. When does the mail go? Oblomov says, the day after tomorrow. So why would I write the letters today? Because the mail's not going until the day after tomorrow. And then there's a wee translation point here where it says in Perel's translation, you're such a slug. I tell you, Ilya Ilyich, you're a lost cause. And Magarshack, you're lazy, my dear fellow, lazy, hopeless, hopeless. And the Russian here is lentyai ty, lentyai, propadyosh, brat, Ilya Ilyich, ni za kopeyku. So it's quite idiomatic. I quite like, you're a lost cause. And you're a slug, or remember earlier we had sluggard in the Magarshack translation. And then we get another little translation point that I liked here where we're getting a discussion of how Tarantyev views foreigners. Because Oblomov says, if only Stoltz were here, Stoltz would know what to do. And Tarantyev's like, what, that German? Are you kidding me? And we learn from the narrator that he doesn't like Germans or French or English, any foreigners. He's quite a racist man. And we learn that he gets that from his father. He goes on to discuss the problem that he sees with foreigners. And it says in the translation, they were all tarred with the same brush, which is a really nice idiom. In Magarshack it says they were all alike in his eyes, which is a very literal translation of the Russian, which reads, on были всё одинаковые в его глазах. So I quite like tarred with the same brush, just as an English idiom. As I said, we'll learn more about Stephen Perel's philosophy here and why he's chosen the language that he has in another video. But Oblomov stands up for Stoltz, stands up for him quite vociferously, which is admirable. It's very admirable. He's grown up with Stoltz, and he says at one point that Stoltz, he wants to learn, to see things, to find out things. And Tarantyev's like, learn? What kind of adult wants to learn things? Look at Alexeyev there. Does he learn things? What about his bastard relative? Is he learning things? But it's quite clear that Oblomov admires Stoltz, and it makes me wonder if in admiring him, he wishes that he could be a bit more like him, but is aware of his own failings and just gives up, which is what he ends up doing at the end of the chapter. So before that, Tarantyev feigns offence at Oblomov's sticking up for Stoltz and says, "Why are you sticking up for this guy? Sort things out yourself, I'll give you back your money." So he's only kidding on. He's clearly got no intention of giving back any money. And he gets a piece of paper out of his pocket and he's like, "Oh, where's that money? Where's that money?" And then he's got the cheek to ask Oblomov if he can borrow a tailcoat for a wedding he's going to tomorrow. He says, "Shout Zakhar in." So Zakhar's summoned, and Oblomov says, "Look out my tailcoat for Tarantyev. I don't think it'll fit him, but let him try it on." And Zakhar's like, "No way." Says, "I'm not getting the tailcoat out. We lent him a shirt and a waistcoat before for a name day party, and he hasn't returned them, and they were expensive pieces of clothing." Of course, Tarantyev's like, "How dare you let your servant speak to me in that way?" But Zakhar, he's loyal to Oblomov, which is quite heartwarming. He says, "No, I'm not going to get the tailcoat." So Tarantyev's like, "Well, screw you," and he storms out. And at this point, Alexeyev, who's still there, I don't even know why he's there, he just serves as a kind of a comic figure, the way that Tarantyev keeps referring to him and including him in the conversation and stuff. And he says, "Right, do you want me to get you a pen and paper and you can write your letters, and then I'll leave you in peace?" And Oblomov's like, yeah, do that. And then he lies down and drifts off to sleep. That's where we leave the chapter. So it's been a very busy chapter, filled with dialogue, and we get to learn about Tarantyev, the con artist, and Oblomov, how he admires his friend, and, you know, good on him for sticking up for Stoltz. That shows backbone. So I don't think he's a lost cause, or a slug, or a lentiai. He's got something going on that's preventing him from being the man he wants to be. He's feeling a sense of overwhelm because he's got all these problems to deal with. And to have to move house, I mean, I can understand that. Moving house is not something to be done lightly. So, yeah. Interesting chapter. As I said, look out for the video I'm going to make about the translation side. It's fascinating stuff. And I do post on Substack as well. So if you head on over to camscampbell.substack.com, there'll be a link down below where you can see the posts that I'm putting out to accompany these videos. I'm hoping to build a corpus of information about this wonderful, wonderful novel, and I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Is it what you expected? Are you finding it easier to read than you thought? Are you enjoying the humour? How do you like the characters? Do you think there is any hope for Oblomov? Or is he a lost cause? Let me know.